today we are going to be reviewing a Sims 2 expansion that I found to be one of the most confusing, frustrating, and oddly ambitious in the entire franchise, The Sims 2 FreeTime. Now, for those of you just discovering this space, my name is Michael, and I want to let you know that you have landed in Sovereign Sandboxing, the YouTube channel where we build, play, and reflect on games that let us shape our own stories. And just like my previous reviews, we are going to be breaking this one down across 5 key categories scored out of 10. Those categories being the concept, innovation, gameplay, impact on the current franchise, and impact on future franchises. And at the end of this video, I'll of course give you my final score and place it on my tier list for the Sims 2 franchise. So let's get into it. Let's just say it. The concept of FreeTime was too broad, too open, and ultimately too unfocused. It was marketed as a way to add hobbies to your Sims' lives, a way to enrich their everyday experiences. But the more I think about it, the more this concept just really doesn't land for me. And honestly, the more I reflect on it, the lower my score gets. Like as I was writing out this episode, it started at like a 5 out of 10, but I'm gonna score it even lower than that. Anyways. You can interpret FreeTime in so many ways. Like, does it mean rest? Does it mean creativity, side hustles, perhaps even personal development? And because it was so open-ended, the developers seemed to apply this vague umbrella theme to as many activities as possible, which is probably why it ended up needing a formula to make it all fit together. And the formula here was to pick a hobby, to do the hobby a bunch of times, to unlock a secret lot, gain some interactions, and then it was just a rinse and repeat after that. And what ends up happening is that every hobby starts to feel the same. There's no strong conceptual vision tying it all together, just really a checklist system for hobbies. And that makes it feel less like meaningful gameplay and more like you're just ticking boxes when you're playing The Sims 2 FreeTime. I'd even argue here that many of the hobbies introduced either deserve their own expansion packs, like the sports, dance, music, arts and crafts hobbies. Like these are really big, rich areas of life simulation that deserved a lot more focus than they got in this expansion pack. And trying to cram all of that into one system really made everything feel underdeveloped, and it also really it didn't allow you to connect to the gameplay. And that's where I feel like it's going to, and that's where I feel that The Sims 2 FreeTime really has a lot of shortcomings. It's just using a formula that is really devoid of actually connecting the player to the gameplay. I'll expand more on those thoughts later on in this review, but in this section, I just wanted to say that the open concept, the lack of focus, really gets a pretty low score from me, and I'm going to give the concept section here a 3 out of 10. Okay, credit where credit is due, FreeTime took a risk. This expansion pack was not a rehash of anything from The Sims 1, it was a bold attempt to introduce a whole new layer of gameplay to the franchise. It asked the big question, like what do Sims do when they're not working, raising kids, or climbing aspiration ladders? And in that sense, I respect it. The idea of hobbies as a gameplay layer could have been a great way to bring depth to your Sims' personalities and routines, and while I don't think it landed very well here, it at least tried to do something different. And the pack, the Sims 2 FreeTime expansion pack, also introduced the secondary aspiration system, which in my opinion was quietly one of the most useful features in the game. It gave Sims more nuance, more variety, and more ways to feel original. It was a subtle feature, but it really went a long way. So despite my issues like with the concept and execution, which I will get into in the next section, I'm actually going to be giving the Sims 2 FreeTime an 8 out of 10 in the innovation category, because at this stage in the franchise, the devs were experimenting, and I'd rather see experimentation than safe, predictable rehashes. So the 8 out of 10 here is well deserved. Gameplay wise, FreeTime is technically well executed, but incredibly formulaic. Like I mentioned earlier, here's the loop. You start a hobby, you do the hobby repeatedly, you unlock the secret lot, and you gain social interactions along the way. And that's really it. every hobby follows this loop. So while there's a wide variety of hobbies on paper, from arts and crafts to cuisine to tinkering, they all function fundamentally the same way. And even worse, some of the hobby categories were too broad. Take arts and crafts, for example. That lumped together sewing, pottery, and painting into one hobby. Why not let each of these be their own hobby? And the same thing goes for music and dance. Like, these are completely different disciplines, yet they're treated like the same thing. And fitness and sports, well, okay. Two things could have been done here. Fitness and sports, first and foremost, should have been combined as one hobby and then split into a specific sport in a separate expansion pack. I'm just gonna go off a little bit on a tangent here, but sports in life simulation games really do deserve their own focus, whether it's in an expansion pack or some sort of an add-on. It's just like, if you're going to be putting in a sport like basketball or soccer, you need those sims to actually play it like the actual sport, and so it does deserve its own attention in that kind of a way. But anyways, they were included in this expansion pack, so I can really only speak about them here, but it just goes to show that for future franchises, they've never really got sports simulation correct here. And yes, it is kind of complicated to program a game within a game, but this expansion pack really embodied the need to have sports as a separate focus. But anyways, the biggest issue here is that these hobbies could have been, you know, the foundation of entire expansion packs. Like, sports should have been its own expansion pack, like I mentioned earlier, but instead, like, they're all crammed into one system with the same formula applied to everything, and it really shows. Now, here's the real kicker when it comes to the gameplay. The hobby enthusiasm decays. So even when your sim gets really into the hobby, that progress starts to vanish unless they keep doing it almost daily. And that turns a relaxing system into a grind. Hobbies are supposed to be fun, but in free time, they started to feel like chores. You're constantly managing enthusiasm bars, checking hobby zones, chasing progress. It really doesn't feel meaningful. And for what? Like a secret lot that you visit once and a couple of social interactions you forget about in a week? Like, I will say this though, like, the secondary aspiration system was a win here. It added layers to your Sims personalities that had been sorely missing. In fact, it again kind of exposed how shallow the Sims personalities were in the Sims 2 franchise up until this point, an issue that actually does get addressed in the Sims 3 and beyond, but again, that's a whole different video, and I'm not docking the Sims 2 points in this section for a fundamental flaw, and it's not a criticism that I actually hold against the Sims 2 at its core, so I'm not going to apply it here to free time. So when it comes to the gameplay, I'm actually going to be giving it a 7 out of 10. Like, it works, it's clean, it's polished enough, but it's just really not deep and it's not inspired. And in many ways, the hobbies feel like busy work. All right, this is going to be a little harsh, but if anything, I think that The Sims 2 Free Time really made the game feel worse in certain ways. The hobby enthusiasm decay made casual gameplay feel like a hassle. Like, you had to stay on top of your Sims hobbies constantly or you risk losing access to interactions and rewards. And that creates pressure in a part of the game that should feel relaxing. And if you had a sim who was also raising kids, working and maintaining relationships, their hobby bar would just plummet. And that's really not reflective of real life. People don't forget how to enjoy painting or music or how to sew just because they didn't do it for a week. Sure, you might be a little rusty around the edges, but your enthusiasm for this skill and for everything, your enthusiasm for the hobby wouldn't diminish. In fact, like, if this was such a huge consideration, like if, you know, being rough around the edges was something that they wanted to reflect in the gameplay, it should also be reflected in the skills as well, because you have a logic skill that doesn't decay. So it's like the energy wasn't kept the same, and I feel like they almost should have been treated as skills more than these hobbies that would just decay over time. The Sims 2 Free Time also really didn't integrate well with the rest of the Sims 2 ecosystem. Like, it felt like a bolt-on feature that lived in its own bubble. It didn't breathe life into family gameplay or community lots or careers, I would say. Like, it had managed to exist in isolation on its own, and it just added more meters to manage. And so for that, I'm actually going to be giving it a low 3 out of 10 for me for its impact on the current franchise. I got another harsh take here. When it comes to The Sims 2 FreeTime's impact on future franchises, I really feel like The Sims 2 FreeTime left no lasting legacy. The expansion pack and its gameplay mechanic were never reinterpreted in future franchises. If anything, you saw some of these hobby activities return in the form of store sets or game packs in future franchises, but not as a leading role taking center stage. And that's because the concept in the beginning just really wasn't strong enough. And instead of laying the groundwork for hobbies and future games, The Sims 2 FreeTime ended up being an experiment that didn't work. It was a one-off, an expansion pack that fizzled, quite honestly. And so if anything, like, this expansion pack proved that hobbies need to be treated with more care. They need depth, they need identity, and of course, purpose. And these hobbies can't be like a progress bar paired with a copy and paste formula. You really need to take the time to really flesh it out and make it a meaningful gameplay experience. And that has been my number one criticism on this expansion pack, is that these hobbies, they just didn't feel deep enough for gameplay. And I don't think that, I know I wasn't able to connect to it as a player, and I don't think a lot of other players were connecting with their free time hobbies. It was just a chore at the end of the game, at the end of the day, I should say. And so for that, I'm actually going to be giving it a 0 out of 10 in this category. The Sims 2 FreeTime is really a fascinating case of ambition that never quite found its footing. It had potential, it had some great ideas, but it was really dragged down by a weak concept, repetitive gameplay, and poor integration with the rest of the game. In the end, The Sims 2 FreeTime didn't feel like a natural part of the Sims 2 experience. It felt like a side quest, a distraction, and honestly, a bit of a chore. It's not a must-have for me, and I have to be honest with you guys, I'm kind of surprised that I scored it so low myself. When I was first reviewing the Sims 2 franchise and kind of mapping out what I wanted to do with the series, I really didn't think that any of these expansion packs were going to be complete duds. But I guess that I surprised even myself. I thought that this expansion pack was just going to be mediocre, but when I went to write this episode, I just started to realize how shallow and formulaic this expansion pack really was. The final score, of course, was a 21 out of 50, putting it in the bad category. So yeah, this surprised even me. But like I said before, as I was starting to write this episode and really think about it, I really didn't like it. So I've already made my case throughout the rest of this video. Anyways, I just want to say thank you so much for watching, and let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree. Did you find value in The Sims 2 FreeTime, or did it feel like a grind for you too? And did you find that it was very formulaic in the way it executed its gameplay? And as always, I just want to thank you again for spending some time in the sandbox with me, and I'll see you guys again in the next video.